Amy, it is awesome to see you. Happy New Year. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mike. Oh, just so good. So good to be in 2024.
Just good to be in 2024. Why is it good from your perspective?
This last year has been a big year of just building really resilience in a lot of areas of my life. And this year is like the breakout year. You know what I mean? Like where you feel like you've done all the hard work, to get to the place that you're like, okay, everything's more calm. There's no fear. I've got confidence. And now it's just about doing.
How do you define resilience?
I think resilience is all about navigating the uncertainty of life, right? And it's really the core of well-being. In my personal journey, I really had to focus on a lot of becoming more aware of my well-being and getting out of the hustle and the grind and that burnout cycle, right? And those are the things I teach. At the same time, you have to live it. And so this last year was really intentionally designed around, taking rest and recovery points during my days and really thinking like an entrepreneur and giving myself freedom and breaking away from that old thinking of the 9 to 5 hustle.
Why do people struggle with that kind of breakaway and giving time to recover?
I think it's a self-worth, at least in my journey, it's self-worth,
Yeah.
is a journey sometimes. Sometimes you have to also give yourself permission. I think that's a big one, especially for any of us who are givers, or maybe we caretake, maybe we're parents, maybe whatever we are, leaders. We just want to give, but we have to give permission to ourselves to receive, right? And that's important for high performance. It's counterintuitive, but it's like, no, you have to like really take that time for focused thinking and to really let your nervous system take a break to be able to get to that next level.
How do you how do you give yourself that space? How do you give yourself permission? Is there a practice that you go through?
I've become really regimented in my days. So what I do is I literally roll out of bed at like 4 a.m. because I'm a morning person. I don't recommend this to my clients who are not morning people, but because that's my natural wiring, I go with it. So we're trained in our society to go against the natural grain, right, of how we're wired. But when we go into, wow, what does my circadian rhythm look like? Like, let's leverage that. That's a point of leverage for all of you who love high performance personal development. So I roll out of bed in the morning and I go straight into high priority activities for 90 minutes. This is before my kids get up, before my husband gets up. Like, nobody's going to distract me. And then I've got the majority of the things out of the way that I need like really focused energy on to allow for more present time with everybody else. And then throughout the day, I give myself little mini breaks, emotional, physical, spiritual, to be able to really have that holistic lifestyle that I really think helps people just do things outside of your comfort zone, create things that you never thought were possible.
How long has it taken you to get here to this point where you kind of feel comfortable with saying, hey, you know what? I am a morning person. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to
Yeah.
find some really high priority items that I can do in that first 90 minutes of the day where everybody else is still sleeping. Like, how long did it take you to get here?
The early morning stuff's been always kind of there, but I would
Yeah.
say I've been really doing this over the last couple of years. It probably took me about a year and a half of a lot of work after shifting from corporate into entrepreneurship to really get rid of some old habits and that grind mentality. And there was a lot of guilt and shame underneath, like, if I'm not on right now, I'm not good enough, right? Or if I scroll LinkedIn, I'm going to go right into comparison mode in my mindset. There are many years in that because of the work that I teach and do myself, we can peel back those layers. And it's really, that's where you find the freedom. That's where you find the ability to reconnect and rediscover yourself after really big life events. I had a lot of traumatic things that I had to process as well during that time. And it's just amazing because then you realize, oh, life is actually for us to live and be happy and flow and be an impact versus, oh my gosh, I have to be in fear. Am I going to make my quota? Did I make enough dials today? All of that stuff that's more constricting.
Do you use data, like So I'm an Aura Ring fan. I know some people will
Yeah.
use Whoop. Some people will just use data on their Apple Watch or use data
Yeah.
to help inform some of this timing stuff in the morning and kind of figuring out, you'd mentioned circadian rhythms. Like, wow, are you using that type of data to understand this about yourself?
No, I really
Okay.
don't. I really go spiritual. I do, Christian prayer, go right up to the source. And I really feel into what is my calling, like and it's not my calling. It's like, and I'm going to go spiritual on you. Like, what is God's will for my life today? Why did I wake up today? Like, what am I supposed to do today? Right? Who am I supposed to impact? That's what drives my energy.
Yes. Good. Where's the spirituality comes from? It's like, what's the basis, the foundation of this?
Well, the foundation is just how I live my life, right? I believe that everything is on purpose and every interaction, this interview is designed on purpose and in divine timing, right? We could have spoken 3 months ago, but it may not have had the same connection or effect as today. So, I mean, these things are, when we get outside of ourselves and our own control, this is where things start to open up. So spirituality for me has, and many of the people that I work with, really allows them to think beyond strong willing every outcome in their life, right? I know we both come from sales, marketing, like those kind of performance driven careers. Sometimes we have proven to ourselves that we can get to a certain result because of our strong will, because we can just grind it out, right? But then we hit a wall or we hit a ceiling and we're like, let's look at that. Why am I only getting here? Why am I only going $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in a year? Why can't I go beyond? Or why am I not happy? Let's take dollars out of it. Why am I not happy? So then you have to go back and go, wait a minute, maybe I'm just not aligned to the impact and the purpose that I was put on this earth for.
One of the cool things that's coming out of the conversation is we're going through are some of the very simple but
Mhm.
deep questions that you're asking yourself in this kind of
Mhm.
self-reflection process. How important is self-reflection to you?
So important, like daily practice, right? A daily practice, because for those of us who are visionaries, we love to go do amazing things and try new things. We're courageous enough to go, like, have a conversation or take the job or take the courageous leap, whatever that looks like. We're not afraid of the doing, but the problem with that is that the doing can keep us in a busy mind. And when we have a busy mind, we miss the calling because we can't hear. And so self-reflection allows us to then hear from some power, our God, bigger than us, and really come back in and say, okay, wait a minute. Let me pull that down. Let me make sure that I'm being obedient to that calling.
I'd like you to repeat that piece around the inability to hear when you're
Mhm.
constantly doing, when you're constantly in this practice of go, 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 go. I'm just
Yeah.
working through my checklist.
Mhm.
Can you talk through that a little bit more? Like, well, first restate what you said, and then let's talk through that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, to really shift out of the busyness, we have to put on those golden listening skills. And self-reflection is a huge part of catalyst for doing that because you have to process, what you're actually doing. You get to recognize as a high achiever. I'm saying this a little bit differently, but you get to recognize as a high achiever, you know, the great things that you are doing, really pumping up that self-worth, and then reflecting on, okay, is this in alignment with my vision, my purpose, God's purpose, like why I'm here, so that you are not staying busy for busy's sake, because activities can be really deceiving, can't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's no shortage of work that can be done. I'm
Yeah.
sure everybody, there are a number of you who are listening right now as Amy and I are talking through this, you have a to-do list, and that to-do list some days gets bigger by the end of the day than when it started. And if you took on everybody's to-dos, you could have a giant to-do list and never find time for self. And I think that if you do not have a practice that you've adopted yet for reflection, for
Mhm.
personal space, whether it's a deep meditative practice or a journaling practice or whatever that is, start testing. It's it's
Yeah.
it's worth the investment. So how did you how did you how did you start to get more comfortable with the idea of pausing, creating space for reflection, going deep into the listening
Mhm.
side of things?
I had to really grow in self-belief that I deserved to slow down. So while I had, I was in corporate America until early 2020, pandemic hit, got out of cybersecurity sales. I knew that I loved that field. I absolutely loved cybersecurity in the company that I worked for, but I knew that like I had young kids and I just knew that the experience of all of that at that particular time in life was not what I really wanted. But I had this belief that that's what I had to keep doing, right? And I had this belief that I just had to keep busy, and the busy defined my worth and all that. So that's how you can start to unravel. And when you start to realize, oh my gosh, I'm identifying my own self-worth and my paycheck, my bonuses, and the busyness at the end of the day, then you can start to reflect on, wow, I get to see differently because it's a mindset shift. That's all it is. However, it's deeper work to really understand that, because then you get to a place where you can allow breaks to happen. You can allow flow. You can start to allow for more prayer, meditation, and the journaling and the things that's what I would call like journaling is an emotional break, right? Where
Mhm.
you get to reflect and you get to really process big life things, because we all have a lot of heaviness on us. It's the world we live in. It's a complex world. We're in a transformative time in the world. And so you get to process that. Otherwise, what happens is just death by 1,000 cuts, right? And so we want to help people prevent that and become more stable and resilient so that you can navigate anything that's coming up in 2024. It's going to be a big year.
Is going to be a big year. Can we talk a little bit about burnout and what are
Mhm.
some of the things that might be indicators that you are burned out, but you're not really willing to admit that you're burning out?
Yeah, inability to sleep. If you're trying to search for all the answers on YouTube over and over and over and processing a lot of things challenges that you're trying to problem solve. As high achievers, we're great problem solvers. But if we hit a wall in our personal relationships, our career, or our health, and we try to like strong will it or try to problem solve our way out of it, that's where we can just really end up in the cycle of stress. And our brains start to look for these answers. And at the end of the day, we can still keep coming back to third party validation. I'm not good enough. Start comparing. So if you want to stop doing those things, stop doing things like comparing, stop complaining, stop gossiping, stop letting fear guide your decisions. And we have to get into a place where, we allow courage to come in, do things differently, and I know you and I have been on that path, like do things differently, go create something. And that's where I think, if you take a courageous path like entrepreneurism, like, wow, what an amazing transformative experience that is. But back to your question on burnout, if you're not feeling regulated, if you feel like your energy is up and down, your emotions are all over the place, you snap easily at people, you're irritable, you just don't have that self-control anymore. It's not your fault,
Yeah.
but your body and your mind and your soul is saying, hey, you're tapped out in whatever area that is.
I have managed this poorly historically,
Hmm.
and I think I'm getting better at it. I know that I have a couple of triggers or things that could happen that if I allow those to happen over a period of time, then there can be a simple kind of straw that breaks the camel's back
Yeah.
that
Yep.
will put me into that burned out state.
Yes.
The big ones for me are if I'm not eating well,
Hmm.
if I'm not working out, and I'd actually
Hmm.
start with working out first. So if I'm not working out and moving well,
Yeah.
then there's risk. If I
Hmm.
add in not eating well, maybe
Hmm.
even drinking a little bit too much,
Hmm.
put those two things in, then if I run into an instance where someone is judging me without context, they could be providing negative feedback, they could be providing things that make me think about some of the
Mhm.
own insecurities that I have around work and all of that kind of stuff. That can be the trigger that puts me into that depressive or burnt
Yeah,
out state, that state of I don't feel like myself,
yeah,
tired. I am just grinding and I need to take a break and just kind of step back. And there are one of the practices I've gotten into just because I had to deal with this a couple of different times over the last couple of years was looking
sure.
back at the data and saying, okay, what's really changed over the last 24
Mhm.
hours? Like it was one interaction, but what really changed over that period? I still have this, we're still doing this. Like that was just that was a triggering event that now I can work through and try to figure out ways to not have those things happen again. And the part of it is beginning on that front end, which is make sure I'm working out, make sure I'm eating well. And then when those events happen, because they're going to happen, then
Yeah.
I've got the systems and processes in place to work through those. That's my process. What do you think? What could I do better in that process?
Yeah,
Or,
I think that's great. I mean, that's why I coach my folks into taking emotional, physical, spiritual breaks,
okay.
right?
Yep.
Even if it's for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, half hour each, but making time for all of those things because you're a 3D being. And so if you're not taking care of your 3D being and you're only doing one avenue, that's why the other parts of you feel burned out because you're grinding in one direction and so that's where flow comes in. And that's where it's counterintuitive, where you're like, well, I can't do all these things. Well, it could be 15 minutes a day. Like, let's be real and rational with our thinking. And like you said, working out, great. Go to the gym because when you get back, you're going to have so much more energy and focus. That's what fuels your focus. Most people are burning out because they're not focused, they're not getting the results, then it just feeds that whole pattern of feeling like they're not getting to where they need to go. And so we have to feed that engine so that we can be productive and focused and aligned to what we're supposed to be creating. And when you're in that, that's really where flow is.
I love that you brought up two really important words, focus and alignment. Let's talk a little bit about the leadership side of things. So let's say we're leading others and we've got
Mhm.
this team of people. And for whatever reason, we keep stacking on new things for them, new to-do lists that we keep adding to their to-do list. And then we
Yeah,
wonder why our teams are starting to get burnt out or starting to
yeah.
not perform or starting to feel less than or starting to get into these high stress things. What are some things that we as leaders can do with our teams to support them, knowing that everybody in one way, shape, or form is working through a lot of these challenges and may or may not have the systems and processes to help navigate or get back into that flow state?
Yeah, that's a great example where oftentimes as leaders, we're getting piled, we're receiving a lot of direction and disparate kind of requests, right? And every leader has to go back to the board, just like you do in your personal leadership. So it doesn't matter if you're listening to this and you're a leader, team's great. If you are an individual contributor, great too, because this is personal leadership. It all translates. You have to go back to your vision, your mission. If you're a mid-level manager and you're reporting up, you have to ask, wait a minute, am I getting this? Is this really in alignment with what's going to drive our results forward to the vision? If not, then use your voice, be confident, don't operate in fear, but go ask questions. Get curious to understand before you start putting more on your team just out of delegation.
Why do folks struggle with that idea of pushing back through questions? Like why do we struggle with that as leaders?
Well, I think innately as humans, we can have, that fear, right? Fear of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if I push back, right? And we may lead with more of that energy. I think if we can lead with more curiosity,
Yeah.
then we can open up a dialogue. We can open up more connection and foster a culture of trust with even, the people that we're reporting to and really start to understand. And sometimes they may just have a vision, they might just be putting that down to you as a leader. And then because you're curious and you're courageously curious, you're flipping the script and they're seeing you as an authority going, oh, and you're making influence and impact. When you do that, then you are then showing the fact that you are really looking at, let's make sure we're in alignment and I'm with you as a team member and I want to carry this forward, but let's make sure that it's all going in the direction that the team is cohesively agreed upon.
As you talk about alignment, like one of the things that some people struggle with is a lack of alignment creates lack of integrity.
Mhm.
And if we're operating in a lack of alignment, that we're operating in the absence of integrity, and if we do not have integrity, our structure has risk. Our structure may fail. And we've
Yeah.
got personal integrity, and we've got structural integrity inside the
Mhm.
business and the
Mhm.
operating relationships that we have with others. So
Yeah.
taking what Amy is sharing here around leading with curiosity, leading with questions, having the courage to ask those questions puts you in a position of strength in the
Yeah.
relationships that you have with others. And when you hold back and don't ask those questions, it actually starts to take away from that strength and creates more weakness. And then you can get down into these cycles. So
Yeah.
really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah.
When you were talking, you'd mentioned emotional, physical, and spiritual. And we've kind of touched on each of those in the context of emotional, kind of working through my stuff relative to journaling, or I say mine, anybody's stuff relative to
Right.
journaling. We talked a little bit about the physical, on the hey, whether it's 15 minutes to go to the gym or getting a quick workout or just taking a walk around the block.
Right.
And we've talked about spiritual, but I'd like to define each of those from your perspective. So let's define what is spiritual.
I think spiritual is connecting with your creator, whatever
Okay.
you align to,
Yeah.
right? It's that force outside of you.
Yep. And you'd mentioned it earlier, the higher power, that thing that's outside of you, something
Mhm.
bigger than us. Amy and I live in relatively the same area. The desert is relatively flat with some foothills. There happens to be one foothill that's bigger than all of the other foothills around here. It's called Santan. They actually call it a Santan mountain. It's not much of a mountain. I think the highest elevation might be 3,000 feet. So it's not,
Maybe.
that might even be a little high. But one of the reflective practices that I have is looking out at that mountain
Mhm.
whenever I'm in different places, whether it's on the golf course or it's, walking around the street, but you see this thing that is bigger than self.
Yeah.
When you get into emotional, what is your definition of emotional?
Emotional, I think, is taking that time to really be present to what you're experiencing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think as drivers, as ambitious people, that's the part oftentimes that I see, and I saw this in myself for many years. We neglect that. And maybe you grew up in that place where no one really has showed emotion. And so you became a driver, you became a high achiever, but that's the missing piece. And that's where connection, this is my biggest growth is I've hired coaches, I've hired lots of people to really help me get those layers of iron that were just wrapped around my heart and soul that were just so like I'm just going to go outdo, be competitive, achieve, and that's where I was, and I miss that whole part of connection. And I was like, oh, like authentic. I get to be vulnerable. I get to, and so now I'm like now I do completely deep transformational work with people. It's kind of funny. But that's why I do that because it builds your ability to connect with other people at a level where you're very present. You're very curious about the other person. It's not about you, it's not about ego. It's really about how can I be that servant leader? And I'm sure a lot of people that listen to your podcast are growing in their servant leadership. And I think that power of emotional connection, you have to be connected with yourself before you can be connected with other people.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. I think one of the people who says this or has done the best job organizing this in a book is a guy by the name of Dan Cockrell. He wrote a book, How is the Culture in Your Kingdom? And
Mhm.
it focuses on, from a leadership perspective, leading self, then leading another person, then leading teams, and then leading teams of teams. And
Yeah.
I talk about it out loud so much that I've internalized it, and my language might be a little bit different than his. But if you're looking for someone to a pretty simple read
Mhm.
on that, I think that's a good one. Why why do folks struggle with this whole idea of leadership of self?
Why do people struggle with it? Well, I think that's probably a unique answer. I think everyone has their own challenges. And I think that when you reach a ceiling, if you're feeling you're reaching a ceiling in
Yeah,
your leadership may be at work, your leadership may be within your family, within personal relationships like your marriage. It may be a relationship with your child. It shows up in different aspects.
yeah,
If you're reaching a place where you're like, I'm not feeling that connection or effectiveness, or something is in breakdown. Maybe your health is in breakdown. Maybe you're like, we're talking about divorce. I don't really want to talk about that, but that's kind of where we're going. Or maybe you're talking about trying to understand your kid and they're like becoming a teenager, whatever it is, right? Those challenges come up.
yeah.
And so I think people struggle because sometimes in leadership, this is a mirror of where we get to go and where we maybe have a gap. And there's resistance, right? Humans can be resistant to change. But then if you shift and you see it as an opportunity instead of a failure or a gap, and you look at it and go, oh, got it. Now I know where life's showing me. Life showed me as an example that I was grew up very neglected emotionally. I had no idea. And it was coming out in really bad ways. And that could have been seen as a failure. But then I realized, no, that's an amazing opportunity. Holy moly. I get a shift now, and that's impacting the whole ripple and trajectory of my marriage and my family.
I love the ownership that you've taken on that. Like this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to get better. And as I break through this thing, we'll be able to move on to the next. I have a strong level of faith. I have gone, I was born and raised Catholic, don't
Mhm.
go to church anymore,
Mhm.
still have a strong level of faith and just practice in a different way. I'm a firm believer that you will only be given the challenges that you have the ability to overcome.
Mhm.
You may not feel comfortable overcoming those challenges. And I've had friends who dealt with siblings dying when we were in high school, or actually when he was in college. But there, I didn't have to deal with death. To deal with divorce, parents were divorced during my freshman year at ASU. We all have these other things that we get put in front of us, these challenges, these obstacles. And as you look at it in the way that Amy's described it as an opportunity to sharpen,
Yeah.
sharpen your skills and your capability, you can move forward. And it's super, super hard. The thing that I also like that Amy highlighted here is that reflection in that mirror. And sometimes your mirror is foggy and is not clear. And this is where working with someone like Amy and working with others and having a group of people that you can engage with can help you realize, hey, you know what? Your mirror actually just needs to be wiped down a little bit and you're going to be able to see things a little bit better. Really,
Yeah.
really cool stuff, Amy.
God is not interested in your comfort. That's the thing. People
Yeah.
want to be comfortable. That then you're being complacent. Comfortability means complacency. And so trust how you get up after a big life event.
Mhm.
I mean, anybody that's read my book, Leading Motherhood, it's all about going through postpartum depression, followed by my father-in-law took his own life the year later, followed by surprise birth number two, which ended up in birth trauma. And from that, I secretly was in conference rooms for about 4 years of PTSD. I didn't know that I had complex PTSD at the time. I just knew that something was right.
Yeah.
So you can go, we all go through, and the people that you're leading might be going through a really big time, and they may be able to mask it from you, and you have no idea. So that's where the power of, your leadership and empathy, being curious, getting to know people at a different level versus just a number or, just people around you and just kind of going and being complacent about things. It is so powerful because then you are able to transform together and have a team and a culture built that is extremely forward thinking and transformational throughout. And it just fosters that sense of well-being and psychological safety for people. And that really empowers high performance.
What what are some of the support structures that you leaned on as you've gone through each of these personal challenges, family challenges that you've gone through?
Yeah. So, at first, I did some like EMDR therapy, hoping for a quick fix. Here's what I learned. There's no quick fix. You can't push a magic button and it'll all go away. Your corporate sponsored yoga class is not going to solve all the world's problems. But entrepreneurship really was the pivotal piece, because what I discovered was transformational leadership work, which is a whole nother level of leadership work where you get down and you do the soul work and you work through all the personal stuff and you do it in a safe environment, right? And so those are the tools that right there is the tool that broke me through deep anxiety after having kids, the deep grief that comes from losing someone very close in a family unit to suicide. It's a very different level of grief. Unless you've gone through it, it's a lot. And also navigating, my church was a big pivotal part of navigating some personal marriage stuff. And so really surrounding myself with people, allowing to see who God was putting in front of me, and then saying, okay, we're just going to go with the flow. Instead of trying to strong will myself back to, a big corporate career or, all those things that my past defined me as, I didn't let my past dictate my future. And so if you allow a transformation to happen, then you will be changed. You will be sharpened. And I always say, I'll come out of my office some days and be like, okay, God's kept me in the refinery today because it got super uncomfortable. But that's where the growth is. And I know that. And so I appreciate and I get so grateful for those days and weeks, which feel hard and heavy. And those situations, in my past that were hard and heavy, but now 2020 is always clear vision, right? So I know that those things were for me because it created such resilience and strength and courage.
So where does the grace come from when you break? Like when things just don't work the way that you expect them to, even now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
where does the grace come from?
Yeah. Well, it comes from above. It certainly doesn't come from me. I mean, when things, like this last year, it didn't go exactly my way,
Yeah,
but the things that needed to happen in order for this year to be what I want it to be happened.
good.
So there you go back on the reflection piece, because if you don't spend the time to reflect, you won't see those things. Right. And
Yep.
I was in a point, and I go public with this. We were at a point in our marriage where we weren't going to be together
Yeah.
many times this last year, but then we both grew back together stronger than ever. And so those points in time you have to allow that transformation to happen. If that's part of your will, part of God's will, I mean, to be able to let that flow, and then it will open doors on his timing. But you have to get out of the way of the timing. And that's the hardest part.
How do you get out of the way of the timing?
I think that you just allow it to happen. Like stay committed in action, stay
Yeah.
committed to your goals, pray it up and say, give me direction. So now I think my next book's going to be all about surrender, quite frankly,
Oh,
because
cool. Yeah.
yeah, because it's all about that process of going, okay, this doesn't make sense. Help guide me. Okay, this doesn't make sense. Help guide me. Instead of just making decisions based on what you see here in front of you, make sure that it's not, what's the word? Like an illusion, but that it's truly, you're making a clear decision with wisdom. Wisdom is key because wisdom will never fail you. Ever, ever, ever. So you have to have the wisdom to be able to make really clear, concise decisions.
Thank you for sharing all of that. It's if you've not met Amy before or not paid attention to the work that she's done, we're talking to someone who's a high performing individual who in the background still had these things going on, just like all of us. We all have some flavor or shape of this if we've not done the deep work. And even if you have done the deep work, it still will figure out a way to rear itself again, and having these
Yeah.
systems and processes that and tools that Amy's highlighted as we've gone through this are really important, and kind of going back and saying, how am I giving myself time for the spiritual side, the emotional side? And we didn't define physical. So what's physical from your perspective?
Yeah, physical is like you said, going to the gym, getting your body moving, getting that, and the process really is getting that stress energy out of your body. For me, it's nature. You know,
Okay.
some of us are really, I'm more of like an empath kind of personality. I take things in deeply. So like after big events, if I'm up on stage talking or if I'm in a big group, I intentionally get up to my mountain place up in Greer or get out to the mountains to go hiking for like the next half a day and just have that, excuse me, place of solitude because I have to reconnect. Otherwise, it's just too overwhelming and I go back into burnout. So just recognize how you are. You may be like that, you may not be. You might be a complete opposite, but just giving yourself those physical breaks of like getting your body moving, getting sweat on. If you didn't get a sweat on today, figure out how to do that.
So Amy, we've talked a lot about this journey over the past couple of years, and then all the experience in 2023, this kind of culmination, and then the excitement of 2024. What's next for you? What's 2024 look like from your perspective?
Yeah, 2024 is an exciting year. It's all about really helping people have resilient growth and really unleashing that superpower because whether, you know, this is in a corporate environment where you're building an organization, a team, a culture, or if you are an individual looking to break into your greatest potential, it is all the same. It's about resilient growth. And that's certainly been the path I've been on as well because we have to have that strength that comes from resilience, that courage, that connection, that confidence, right? The 7 C's of resilience to be able to really cut through uncertainty and navigate all the changes in the world. And I don't think there's no shortage of challenges right now in the world.
What would you like to close with? Like, how do you want people thinking? What do you want people doing next?
I'm on a mission this year to really help people cut through fear and anxiety. When you feel those human emotions come up, the thing that you can automatically do is just think, wait a minute, in this situation, in this conversation, in this relationship, whatever it is, in this business decision, is this fear that I'm holding on to, or can I make a courageous decision? And what is that?
Amy, you're awesome. Where can people find out more about what you're working on? Where would you like to send folks?
Yeah, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, Amy Looper. You can go to my website, which is Amy Lee, Leigh, looper.com. And always happy to have a discussion.
If you know of somebody who would enjoy this conversation, get something out of it, gain value out of it, is kind of working through a number of the things that Amy has walked us through over the discussion, please share it with them and let us know via LinkedIn. When you do these shares, it helps amplify the podcast, helps get the podcast out in front of new people in the audience. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?